with the session. I would request the chairperson to unmute and switch on the camera. And for that, I'm starting with Dr. Gagan Jadeja. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everyone. And we'll have our session on NABH. How can it be practically useful to you in your hospital? So today amongst faculty, we have Dr. Nirmal Frederick. He is one of the persons, he led the team which developed iCare standards. He's a very senior NABH assessor. He's very active in IMA and he has done multiple assessments and have done multiple training courses all across India, including the AIOS CME series on accreditation. So he's the best person to learn from. I think so all of us have learned from him. Any questions you have, any difficulties you have, he's your man. Dr. Kumran is again practicing ophthalmologist from Chennai. His special interest in OT and infection control. He has been part of almost 100 plus courses on NABH and related topics. Dr. Samina is from Bangalore. She also has a passion for quality, has her own practice and is an NABH assessor. She conducts regular meetings and regular training courses for all kind of NABH related activities, and again a very good teacher there. Dr. Shakeen from Amritsar is also a very senior NABH assessor and has a vast experience in assessing and is very much into teaching and training on NABH in northern part of India. I am Gagan. I practice in Narayana Netralaya. All of us are ophthalmologists, by the way. I forgot to add that. And NABH is our passion. Quality is our passion. We want things to be in a better way. That's why we are doing this course. I'm also an NABH assessor. And I have been part of this team doing this kind of training courses all across India for last 5 to 10 years, even abroad. So welcome to our course and we'll start. There might be a few questions you have. Please keep sending those questions. In the end, we'll take all of them together. So I'll start with the first talk, which is just to set the tone for the talks to come. So the first part is how do you start? So when you talk about NABH, what will be your starting point is the first question everyone has and is what you probably want to ask us. So the first thing is you have to understand and prepare what you want. So you want to play a game, you need to have the rule book. You can't play cricket by rules of football. Similarly, you want to write a history exam, you read history book. You can't write a history exam by reading, let's say, geography book. So first you have to decide what NABH standards are suitable for you, because NABH has got various standards and all of them may not be applicable to you. So one sec, I'll just mute it. Okay, done. So a typical thing would be these two standards are there, and this is an example I often repeat. Two of ours, my juniors have a hospital about a kilometer apart in the same geographical area in a city, and both of them were going in for NABH and had their assessment together. So one guy went in for an iCare standard, which is onto your left. The other guy took an entry-level standard, which is onto your right. Now, once their assessment was done, which again, if you have to believe, was about a week apart or 10 days apart, both of them were together and they were discussing, and then they called me. They said, yeah, see, I had this thing, he had this thing, he got an NC, I did not get an NC. He got NC for this, like why there is so much variation? They called me, and then by the time it happened, I realized that, the standards will have something different. iCare has something extra which entry level does not have. So if you're going in for a higher standard, you need to comply to that standard. So they were having the same hospital, similar thing, but applying two different standards. The typical story of that elephant, that someone finds it's a rope, someone finds it's a snake. So whenever you are going to start an ABH, you have to understand which of these standards is applicable to you. You want to go in for an iCare standard or you want to go in for an entry level standard. And now you also have the 5th edition of NABH, which has come in. So how do you get this standard? I'll show you live here. So you go and open NABH website. Is it visible to you?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you go and open NABH website, which is in front of your screen now. Okay, so here if you are going to go, there's this link, NABH standard. Once you go onto this link, all these standards are now freely available to download. Earlier it was not. So you can download all these standards. You can't print them, they are locked. If you want a printed copy, you can pay NABH board and it will come. But to get the flavor of it or just to refer it, you can download all these standards free of cost. And while you are on NABH website, I'll also show something and then we'll go back. Here you can see this entry-level certification, HOPE, login. So the process of application is also online, which will happen from here. And there are other information also which you can go down. So these will be the login. You are going to use an SCO login, and all the important announcements and all will come here. You are going to ask what is the fee. Fee structure is also mentioned here. So this is the fee structure for eye care. How much?
Gagan, sorry to interrupt. We are not able to see the screen, sir.
Okay.
It is in the Wait for NABH website that it is visible right now in front of us.
Okay, 1 second. Is it okay now?
Yes, yes, it's come.
Absolutely okay, sir.
Okay, so I'll just repeat, sorry for that. Now, if you see there is this IOSH level certification, entry level certification, no, these are the login links on the top. And here there is a link for NABH standard. Here, if you see, all the standards are available for free download. Okay, you can download it from here. And then when you come to the home page, interestingly, you will find all these links below. And these quick links are one which I'm talking about, like fee structure. This is a fee structure, which is going to be a question. So I'm preempting that. How much do you pay is all mentioned here. And then, how do, important links, archives, everything is here, notifications, and you will also find the OT guidelines here and clarification on, 5th edition FHIR. So all this information is on website. So many of the things is, the moral here is that, you need to check the website for the relevant standard section so that you are well prepared and you know where you are. So don't need to do things which don't suit you. All NABH standards, if you see, will have 10 chapters. And they will have different standards and objective element. To give you a comparison, eye care standards has got 10 chapters, 66 standards, and 305 objective elements with 305 kind of checkpoints for assessors and for you. And SHCO has got 149. So there are lesser number of checkpoints for SHCO standard in entry level. So these are the chapters. The next thing what you need to understand is these abbreviations. AAC. AAC is nothing but Access, Assessment, Continuity of Care, first chapter. MOM, Management of Medications, like third chapter. So it's like our ODOS, patients don't understand when we say lateral, dextro, or whatever. So these are the things. So you have to understand the terminology. So all the time in trainings and all, you'll hear this. AAC, CQI. So AAC means chapter 1. AAC 1 means chapter 1, standard 1. Like this. So you write AAC 1, AAC 2, AAC 3, AAC 4. These are the standards in that AAC chapter, which is first chapter. And if you see here, each standard has got objective elements, which are A, B, C, D. So if you say AAC 1D, it refers to chapter AAC first standard D element, right? Now, once you have the book and you are going to have this, actually it's a good cure for insomnia. You can read 2-3 pages and you'll really fall asleep. It's a very dry book because it doesn't make sense. It talks in kind of a semi-legal language. So just to take this example, what it says is these objective elements. Now, for you to have to understand what is the intent and how it applies to you. So this element will be different. This implementation will be different in your hospital versus the other hospital. So first question now, if we say the eye care services are being provided are clearly defined. So eye care services mean what you provide, retina, glaucoma, cataract, whatever. Have you defined what services you provide? If you have not defined, you have to define. There's a gap there that, okay, you need to define. Then each service, I just come to see, if you see, it says prominently displayed. Have you displayed your scope of service? If you have not displayed, then you need to, make a display and put. The further to this is the display has to be bilingual at least. So, wherever you are, English, Hindi, English, Kannada, English, Tamil, you'll have to have a bilingual display. The staff are oriented to the service. So the staff working in hospital should know what services we offer. So how do you tell the staff? You tell them by training. So actually speaking, the objective D means you train your staff, let them know what it is, but the language is the staff is oriented to the service. How you orient is left up to you. That's the reason that it gives hospital a free hand to do the part which takes to comply to this thing. So this is where you have to understand what you need to do in your organization for a particular element or particular standard. And whatever I told you now, you will ask me, where is it written? Where is it written bilingual and all? So for that, you need to refer to the guidebook. You need to refer to the guidebook of eye care standard. You need to refer to 4th edition guidebook or 5th edition guidebook. You can use this AICME series, and there are multiple other resources and publications in various journals. So you get those, but again, a simple thing, when we study, we always ask our seniors. Similarly, if you really want an easy journey, you may like to ask your friends, colleagues, senior who have actually done NDBH. They may be able to even refer you more, and more so for the local thing, because many things are very localized, which we may not be aware. So Gujarat is something which I'm not sure. So people who are in your city, who are in your place, will be able to definitely help. IMA also is really active in this and keeps conducting many things. So those kind of information is there. Your preparation has to be done before you actually start. So give it us some time, get everything understood, and then go further. And in addition to this, you also have multiple training activities which keep happening, paid or free. There's no harm in attending those training activities. In fact, more people from your organization, if they attend those training activities, it's good. So this is how the guidebook states. So the same thing which I showed you now has some kind of an explanation given to it, which is what I am trying to talk about. So this is a kind of a same standard. If you see, this is a scope of service of a eye hospital. So this is how you make a scope of service. This is documented and this is what we display, and obviously make it into a bilingual. Now another example, like MOM, when we say MOM 1C, the eye care organization has a list of medications appropriate for patients and organization. What is a list? What is it? It is nothing but a formulary. You Google a formulary, you'll understand what is a formulary, but formulary is nothing but a list of medications, what you have, along with the name, dosage, route of administration, all those things. Now, other things are like you have this kind of jargon being thrown when you're going for an NABH. LASA drug. What is LASA drug? I didn't know any LASA drug before I actually heard about NABH. LASA is nothing but an acronym for look-alike, sound-alike medications. So Tropicacil plus Tropicacil, they are sound alike. You take two medications from same company, the packing remains same, they become kind of look alike. So the thing is that these drugs can be mistaken. And I'm very sure that all of us would have had an experience when Tropicacil plus or Tropicacil have been, mixed in OPD. So instead of putting in plain tropicamide in a hypertensive patient, cardiac patient, the staff would have instilled Tropicacil plus. A mistake like this is very common even in a medical college. So to prevent those mistakes, you need to have look-alike, sound-alike drugs separately so that things are not there. So this is a kind of an interpretation for the standard what was there. So if you look at the language of the standard and what it actually means, it's things. So once things get translated into plain simple English, it is easy. So this is where the job is. Once you reach to this standard, you'll find NABH is not a burden. It's not so cumbersome. So this is our list, what we have. There's a list of look-alike drugs in our hospital. So this yellow color labels will be there, means it's a look-alike, be careful before you use. Similarly, sound-alike drugs, there will be a green color on that. So you can see Ciplox, Ciplox D, all these Alpha-Gen Z, Alpha-Gen P, these kind of drugs where the manufacturers just add Dorzox, Dorzox T. So in fact, I feel that, the companies should stop doing this where we have lots of look-alike and sound-alike, but probably their commercial interests are much more than the safety here. So if you need answers, it's not only that you need to look it in a general hospital, in an eye hospital, even a general hospital will have all the standards. Standard remain the same. You can talk to general hospital also. In fact, in certain areas, like when you're talking about math and you're talking about emergencies, it may be better. So OT guidelines, NABH has given OT guidelines. You need to go there, download that, and that's a fire norms also is a confusing thing. I showed you the website. NABH advisory is there, very clearly written, and it shows that what is to be done in case there's an NOC or there is not an NOC. Some other thing is KPI. It will be discussed further down also. But KPI is nothing but key performance indicator. Fancy name used all the time in industry and everything. What is key performance indicator? Any indicator which is key to the performance. So for airline, the example I take, let's say on-time performance. So 99% on the the flights are on time. That's a key performance indicator. For a broadband connection, it says this much speed. That's a key performance indicator. For ophthalmology, you say endophthalmitis, so rate of infection for number of surgeries. That's a kind of a key performance indicator for that particular surgery. So you could have n number of key performance indicator. NABH has given all these indicators in the book, and that you have to follow. You can always have more of yours. And there's a separate chapter on this in the AIS CME series, which is very well written. There are certain mandatory trainings which are required for this. Fire, code blue, and safety training, occupational patient right training. These trainings have to be arranged. And then once you have done this, you also go back, and if you see, this is the link which you'll get for eye care organization. So there are all this brochure information which are pertaining to your standard and your particular application. And similarly, this will be for small healthcare organization. And once you do there, once you're ready, you have to apply online with all the documents, legal things, and also a self-assessment toolkit. One important thing is which will be covered. I'm just taking the names here, something called gap analysis. I told you before that you need to have a documented and displayed scope of services. If you don't have, that's a gap. So you find that things which are missing in your hospital, they will be there, or the format is something different, or things have not been documented. So you have to believe one thing, that if your hospital is working, it's doing fine, there are no major issues, means your hospital is doing well in medical practice. There are certain gaps in the way we document things. There are certain gaps the way we have things. So things need to be streamlined a little bit. That's all. So we'll have those gaps where things need to be streamlined in a little better way, and we can bridge those gaps. Once those gaps are bridged and you're ready with other things, you can go ahead and apply. Important thing is statutory and legal requirements. Sometimes hospitals do get stuck with this, especially the old hospital. You may like to start there. make sure that legally you are, all the legal requirements as given in NABH are there. And if it is there, you can start doing other things. It should not happen that everything is done and in the end you get stuck with legal, because that has happened in case of many hospitals. And can't emphasize the training. Training is very important. The very fact that you are attending this course is a kind of training. So once you have done, then trainings are required. This I'll skip because it will be there. This is the last thing. You have to fill application form, upload the data, and go ahead with it and go with assessment. Some of the things will be also covered by Dr. Nirmal in his talk, so there might be a bit of overlap. Sorry for that. Thank you for your attention. And next talk will be by Dr. Nirmal now.
Okay, just give me a moment.
Yes, sir. Dr. Nirmal is going to talk about step-by-step approach and benefits of accreditation. I did cover a couple of his slides here, but he will be going into details. I just told you the names there. But this is a very interesting talk, and it's very fascinating because he is going to take you to the entire thing, and especially the last part. What are the benefits? Because that's again a question that why you are spending time, money, and effort. That really explains and is crux of his presentation, that the benefits what we accrue from going in for NABH and how it can help our practice be better.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gagan, for the kind introduction and invitation for this important IC. Am I audible?
Audible and slides are seen, sir.
Thank you. Right, Gagan has really put the course on course to the journey, and it's my duty to take this forward. And the journey of 1,000 miles, how to begin with one step. And I really hope you will start your accreditation journey today. So whether to go for accreditation, which standard, Gagan has nicely enumerated, and the decision making is with the leadership. Somewhere a leader has to start this process. It is owning a practice. And basically leadership is the key to team building, problem solving, and the important facet of accreditation is continuous improvement and performance measures. So basically these two standards apply for eye care hospitals, eye care centers, and eye care institutions, the entry-level standards and the eye care standards. And you need not buy this now, it's free for download. You can download from NABH website. It's very important you go through the standards book. There are 10 chapters, whatever standards you select. So go through them and read with the mindset that you are going to apply the standards. Yes, it is boring, but if you are owning a practice and looking forward to expand it or improve the quality of services or improve the brand image of your practice, it's mandatory that the leaders read the standards book and brainstorm with their people. Planning and brainstorm is important. As you all know, failing to plan is planning to fail. So it's important during brainstorming, you also get to know your team and how oriented they are to the vision, mission, and quality policy of your center. So this may sound a bit management jargon, but it's very important even for a small practice to write your vision, mission, and quality policy and let your other stakeholders know your vision for the institution. Planning also helps based on your vision, mission, and quality policy in team formation. It's very important you have a quality coordinator to coordinate the entire process. This person will be the leader, and you also need to tell them about the job description and know their strength and weakness, their knowledge, education, skill requirement, experience in managing the other people or the work people, and then the environmental conditions. So all these things are important in giving a job to this particular person. So after selecting a quality team or quality coordinator, you have to give him the team to lead various committees. So it's important that you have various committees quality committee, safety, CPR committee, clinical audit, infection. These are some of the committees that will help you in the entire accreditation process. And it's important you select the right people for this job. And you have to conduct, and this team will conduct the gap analysis. So what is to be available along with after the standard implementation and what is available now. So this will also help you to understand what are the standards that are already met in your hospital, what are partially met, and what are needs to be implemented properly. So this review will really help you understand the present status of hospitals. So most of the hospital will somewhere, the initial impression will look like this, and the clinical areas, most often it would have been already implemented at least fully or partially, but in the non-clinical areas, the management perspective and the facility side, it may be in the initial phases. The third aspect to focus on, the third step is on the statutory and licenses. You need to understand the regulatory requirement for hospitals and also the relevant memorandum of understanding with your other stakeholders, particularly outsourced services. These are some of the licenses that is required for NABH accreditation and also to run your practice. Now, of course, Clinical Establishment Act is mandatory now. And if it is not available in your state, a local body registration is necessary. If you have a proper setup, building completion or occupancy certificate is needed. Pollution Control Board consent for air, water, and sound is an important requirement to run a hospital. Fire safety, again, is an important need for accreditation. Whether if it's entry level, you need to have a NOC or a structural certificate. PCP&AT, if you're owning a USG, a B-scan, and if you're running a pharmacy, you need to have a license. So these are some of the list of statutory compliances required. In addition, you also need to have the proper memorandum of understanding with all your outsourcing agencies, ESIPF, as well as the pharmacy, if you're outsourcing, and also biomedical wastage. In accreditation, there is a triad called structure, process, and outcome. And these are important element for you to understand the entire accreditation structure and implement in your hospital. Good structure increases the likelihood of good process and also leads to good outcomes. So infrastructure is the fourth step. So you have to focus on the patient care and critical areas, the communication system in your hospital, both written and as well as the electronic communication system, fire and patient safety requirement. And many of our patients, we deal with the vulnerable group. So you need to have a disabled friendly facility and power or water backup plans. So it's important that you focus on these areas and try to upgrade it with patient safety requirement. For example, railing to hold on to stairs, emergency department access to ambulance and wheelchair patients, and ramp or lift if your critical areas are in the upper floors. Operation theater is the sanctum sanctorum for ophthalmic facilities. You have to have a proper design and structure for your theater. Also focus on equipment and disposables, the consumables you use for the patients. And also important is to maintenance of OT, both patients, personnel, as well as equipment. So the form follows function. The fifth step is focus on training of hospital staff. NABH involves a lot of mandatory skill development, particularly with reference to patient safety standards. And the chairman to doorman have to be trained on the various aspects of NABH standard. These are some of the key areas for staff training: preventing needle stick injuries, knowing about patient rights and responsibilities, various emergency codes, safe injection practices, and emergency evacuation code. The sixth step is documentation and implementation of this documentation recovered right from records, formats, work instruction, and the procedure. You need to standardize them. You need to have a standard operating procedure for all your departments, and all this will be part of the quality manual, which is a requirement for NABH implementation. And a word about documentation and manuals: don't copy from your neighbors or other hospitals, because be original and don't plagiarize. It's very important that you write the manuals and standard operating procedures based on your hospital, what you can do and what you cannot do. All this should be part of your standard operating procedures. The most important question asked in many of the forums is whether to have EMR, whether that is mandatory. You can have manual systems also, particularly to start with for small hospitals, but later on digitization really helps in data collection and also analyzing the data to use it for quality improvement purposes. The implementation of standards start with patient care standards and then slowly go to the organizational standards and involve the physicians, nurse, and paramedics in all this standard implementation. These are some of the department-specific standard operating procedures, how you assess the patients, how care plan is documented, what are the clinical protocols for various care or procedures, how you document them, the consent, patient education, and counseling process, what are the outcome measures, and how you are going to follow them. This is important across the clinical department: patient rights, hand washing, autoclaving, and CSST, sterilization, and hospital infection control norms. Particularly in COVID time, hospital infection control takes a major part of your workflow, so you have to focus on that. The seventh step is internal audit. For any quality improvement programs like NABH, internal audit is very, very important. And most of us may not have learned this in medical colleges or in your postgraduate education.
Errors,
so you have to understand that auditing
medicine,
is an important part of
mistakes
NABH
in
curriculum.
surgical procedures,
Part of this is also a concern about the common errors that can happen in eye care, particularly infections, as well as wrong side, wrong eye surgery. So this is one patient where squint was operated in the wrong eye. You also need to do safety audit on a regular basis, the entire facility, particularly the key areas like operation theaters, and evaluate the patient and staff safety measures. The eighth step is incident reporting and root cause analysis. A lot of untoward accidents or deviations can happen in the workplace. It's important that you encourage your staff on reporting all these events and incentivize reporting. So this is important because you can do a proper root cause analysis and see where the problem lies, whether the problem is in the implementation or whether there is a problem in the infrastructure or structure. So if it is an infrastructure, the management can focus on this. If it is a problem on the process related thing, you have to focus on the training and feedback mechanism. The step 9, after implementing all these things, do a thorough internal audit once, twice, or thrice before you apply for assessment. So ensure that NABH standards are implemented and integrated in the day-to-day functioning of the hospital or the eye centers, and then focus on the external assessment by NABH assessors. So what are the benefits? So basically, once you go through the assessment process, you learn a lot. And so I already told about the self-assessment, pre-assessment, and final assessment. These are the steps in the NABH accreditation process. Across the steps, there is a lot of quality improvement that happens, and not only in the final assessment, but also after that. That is called as surveillance and re-accreditation. And what are the benefits? So you can ask what you get out of this entire process. So much investment on the accreditation process, so much time and resource on the training of various staff category. What do you get out of it? So what are the benefits? So there are a lot of major secondary, primary, and minor benefits, and a collateral multitude of tertiary benefits. So what are they? So most often, most of the corporate setup and individual private institutions go for accreditation for branding. So the major primary benefit or goal of accreditation is to promote the quality or practice development program to make the hospital safer, viable, and sustainable. So this is one of the reasons accreditation is being focused by the medical tourism providers as well as the major corporates. Patients now prefer internet, and third-party agencies focus on NABH accreditation as a way to choosing the right hospital, as well as look for accreditation symbols. So they are also bothered about the rights and important communication. So accreditation really takes you one step ahead of other hospitals when you have this. That's one of the reasons most of the branding and marketing strategies focus on quality and accreditation. So these are the ways you promote accreditation as well as the patient safety norms across the various media. And this is also one of the benchmarking indices to focus on where to get into the best hospitals in India. There are a lot of benefits for the leadership, particularly the owners. It raises community confidence, increases patients and customer satisfaction, and helps in benchmarking where your hospital or center stays comparing with the peer group, and also gives a good return on investment because it improves the financial improvements. There are benefits for the medical and paramedical staff working. It improves professional development, provides education on a regular basis on standards, on a consensus standard, which is accepted by the government and other third-party payers, and also increases job satisfaction. And there are good HR practices and accountability ingrained within these standards. And these are some of the benefits for hospital employees: measures employee satisfaction, employee safety and security, and also infuses energetic enthusiasm during the assessment and also team building. And benefits for the patient: this is the primary benefit for patients. You have access to a quality focused hospital. The rights are respected and protected. There is understandable communication and focus on patient safety and care. So there is less deviation and accident during patient care protection. And collaterally, there is a benefit to others: subjective system of evaluation of your practice by third party, insurance, corporates, and medical tourism, and also gives a reliable certified information on your infrastructure and level of care to the lenders and VC funding for further development. So is accreditation beneficial? It is for all the stakeholders: better outcome, increase efficiency, reduce risk, and enhance quality and safety. So these are some of the do's. So brainstorm, training is mandatory, self-assessment is mandatory, and close the deficiencies effectively. So overall, accreditation is an important aspect of your hospital practice and brand building. It's a win-win situation for patients, staff, management, government, payers, and corporate. So thank you so much, and best wishes for your accreditation journey. Thank you so much. Over to you, Gagan.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That was a really good talk. And next we have Dr. Kunran talking about infection control practices and operation theater protocols and design. Now, this talk is useful to you even if you are going in for NABH or not. So I think so this is the talk after this session which will really benefit anyone who's attending this. Over to you, Dr. Kunran.
So is my slide seen? Am I audible?
Yeah, slides are seen, you're audible.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Good morning and a warm welcome to all. It is a great pleasure to be with you in this IC, and it's a good to be in the IC also. So my topic is on operation theater design and hospital infection control. These topics by itself can be talked for a whole day. So I'll try to concise these two topics in the next 15 minutes, and I'll be running through some slides, and I have a couple of videos also. If they don't play, just let me know so I will skip them. So news like this are becoming more common now, and any health-related issue is caught by the media very commonly. And what we need to understand is that having an infection in your practice is not a crime, but if that has occurred because of not following certain protocols, then it is viewed seriously by the court of law. So the main intent of this talk is to help all ophthalmologists and hospital administrators to define a hospital infection control program, which could be not only beneficial for the patients, but also for the staff which are working in the hospital. Okay, evolve an antimicrobial policy, and more important, also teach them about biomedical waste disposal, which is an important legal entity, and also take importance on staff education. So I'll run through the operation theater design. However small or large your theater is going to be, there are certain basic factors which need to be considered before going into the construction. They are the location of the theater, the zone-wise distribution, and space allocation for instrumentary, and so on. There are certain points which are usually neglected till the end the theater is constructed. They are the ventilation standards, making the theater differently able-friendly. And most of the time, we find that the emergency exit and fire exits are not given importance. The whole theater is constructed, and then they think about all those things. So these are the factors which needs to be considered before you even start doing your operation theater. Constructing a theater is a multidisciplinary approach, and it needs collaboration from all these people. You being the main a leader of the army have to give inputs to all these engineers and tell them what you need. Only then you'll be able to get exactly how you have dreamed your theater to be. So there are 4 zones in an operation theater, which is commonly known as protective, clean, aseptic, and disposal zone. We'll go and look into each one of this in in brief. So the protective zone is basically the zone where every person is allowed to enter with their street clothes. And if you're planning to have a restroom, it should have to be in this zone. It also consists of stores, a post-operative and pre-operative rooms. The clean zone is basically an intermediate between the protective zone and the aseptic zone. You can incorporate the stores room, the equipment, and the maintenance in these areas. The main area is called the aseptic zone, which is a sanctum sanitorum. You can also include the scrub room into this. If you're in a smaller setup, like an ophthalmic setup, it is always to include the scrub room also into the aseptic zone, or it could be a part of the clean room also. The disposal zone is another place which is usually neglected in smaller hospitals, but it adds sense to include a disposable area so that all the unsterile goods could leave the theater through this directly into the public corridor. The other area that needs to be considered in the larger setups are the pre-operative area, the holding area, the manifold area, and the theater sterile supply unit. In smaller setups like the ophthalmic setup, sometimes it is not needed to have a separate theater sterile supply unit. You can probably include it with the OT or adjacent to the OT. This is one of the most important place in any operation theater complex, because this is what is going to supply all the sterile goods into the theater. This is a view of an ophthalmic theater sterile supply unit, where in one end of this CSSD area, you receive all the unsterile equipments. They are clean, washed, and there's an assembly on the tray where it reaches the other end, where it is packed and put into a double door autoclave. So this autoclave opens into the other area, which is adjacent to the theater, and hence the flow of the sterile and unsterile goods is not disturbed. So going into the hospital infection control, these are the topics in which I'm going to talk about, starting from the assessment of the patient, going on to hand hygiene, and going all the way through biomedical waste disposal and staff management. So the initial thing to be considered in any hospital infection control is to find out the source of the infection, because once you find the source of the infection, the other things are quite easy. So what are the areas from which an infection could spread to a patient, starting from person-to-person contact, clothing, environment, airborne, hospital staff could also be carriers. One of the most important thing I would like to highlight here is rare common source outbreak. We in ophthalmology use a lot of consumables which are shared among patients. So this could also be one of the commonest cause of common source outbreaks in our practice. The antibiotic policy is very important, because the hospital administrators have to sit about, list the number of diseases or the infection they treat, and form an antimicrobial agent which is being used for it as type 1, as the first line defense and second line defense. And this choosing of the antimicrobial agent should be based on some scientific papers and the common microbe that is available in that particular area. And it's important that all the doctors use the same molecule for that particular infection. Any deviation has to be monitored. So these are the common terms which we come across. Cleaning, disinfection, and sterilization is what we're going to talk about in the future slides. The importance of personal protection devices need not be overemphasized in this pandemic area, and it is important for the hospital administration to make sure that the right quantity of PPE is available to all the people and the staff available in the hospital. In this pandemic, there is no difference in the PPE usage between an OPD staff and a theater staff. In fact, all patients should be considered infective until otherwise proved is the old terminology. And we have to say that all people are infective unless otherwise approved. The importance of hand wash need not be overemphasized. These are different types of hand wash available. It is always important that you do a complete hand wash and a feet wash also before you enter into any clinical specific areas, not alone the OT, but also into your OPD. These are the 5 timings of hand wash as listed by the WHO, before you come and contact the patients, after an aseptic swab, and so on. The environmental cleanliness is also very important, because it is being proved beyond doubt that the environment can also be one of the sources through which infection spread to our patients. So we have to identify all the high-risk areas in your hospital, which might start right from the parking lot and go into your theater also. These areas has to be identified, a proper protocol and a process has to be defined, and a proper surveillance has to be done to make sure that the environment is being kept clean. A spillage kit is very important. All your staff has to know what a spillage kit is, the blood and body fluid spillage, the method of cleaning, segregating the area has to be taught to all your hospital staff. And cleaning any environmental surface, medical or non-medical, always follow the 3-bin technique, where you use an RO water or a distilled water, where a clean linen cloth or a mop is immersed sequentially, and the figure of 8 method of cleaning is employed. These are the common disinfectants that could be used. I have just listed out the frequency in which the high-risk areas has to be cleaned on a daily basis. The most important thing I would highlight here is that the refrigerator cleaning is mostly neglected in most of the hospitals, and this has to be taken care of. Sodium hypochlorite is the most economical and the most commonly and the most effectively disinfectant available. Here I have given you a chart of how you could prepare a 1% sodium hypochlorite to different raw materials that are available to us. So before you enter into your theater, make sure that you switch on the air conditioning to reach the parameters of temperature and humidity at least 1 hour before you enter your theater. Make sure all the parameters are complete before you enter your theater. And once you enter, make sure you use an aldehyde-free, alcohol-based disinfectant and a clean, lint-free cloth to wipe all the surfaces, making sure that you don't use the same side of the lint-free cloth to wipe repeatedly. Then once you transfer all the surgical bins into the theater, the head nurse should ensure that all the indicators are checked before going on to don the PPD and prepare the Mayo table. And an important point to mention about the medicine storage is that all the medicine should be stored as per the manufacturer guidelines, and all the refrigerated medicines should be stored in the particular temperature so that the temperature, humidity are continuously monitored. It is also important that you put in a data logger, which are very easily available now, so that you will be able to record the variations in temperature on a daily basis. The instruments that are not used very commonly should be stored in an area where the physical parameters are closely monitored to prevent mold formation, and it's a good practice to store them under UV chamber also. This is the data logger of my refrigerator, which shows the variation in temperature is within the standard limit over a week's time. The engineering control is the most important, the most effective part of infection control, which simply means that you're going to block the pathogen from entering the main source. A simple example could be an exhaust fan, and a better example which holds good in our particular thing will be your HVAC system, or the heating, ventilation, and the system. The HVAC system consists of 3 parts: a hand handling unit, a compressor, and a laminar airflow through which the air is cleaned, filtered by a set of 10 microns and a 3 micron filter, and it is blown through an air blower into the theater from the ceiling, so that you get a uniform laminar flow of air from the theater across the tables, carries all the passengers floating around the theater into the return ducts, which are usually placed around 1.5 meters above the flow level. So disinfecting and sterilization of the instruments is very important. So this is a cycle through which all the instrument goes through. Once you purchase an instrument or it reaches your place after it is being used, it should be cleaned, disinfected, inspected, and if it is found faulty, it should be disposed through proper biomedical waste disposal or returned to the manufacturer. This is very important. Then they are packed, sterilized, stored, either for further usage or it goes back into the theater. So it's very important to follow the manufacturer guidelines of how to pack these instruments and how to sterilize the instrument to be more effective in the sterilization process. So once all the instruments which are used should be received in a separate tray, and they should leave the theater immediately and not be stored in the theater while the other case has been carried out. The instrument then should be processed in an ultrasonic cleaner so that all the blood and body fluids are separated, and then you follow the 3-bin technique where they are scrubbed sequentially in a distilled water preferably before they are cleaned, and they are air dried before they are packed. Packing should be done in either 3 forms, either with linen, paper plastic pouches, or non-woven paper as per the GSM listed here. It is a good technique to place all the trays vertically as shown here so that there's a steam penetration all around. The autoclave principle is common to everybody, as we know that the water boils when the vapor pressure equals the atmospheric pressure. There are 3 different types of autoclaves which we use in a clinical practice, and based upon the type of load which you are going to process, you have to use a gravity autoclave, which is useful in non-porous and non-hollow instruments. The pre-vacuum and the pulse vacuum basically removes the air inside the autoclave to be the steam process more effective. Then whatever autoclaving you've done, quality assurance of station is very important. There are 3 basic parameters: the physical indicators, chemical indicators, and the biological indicators. These are all the indicators which has to be used to make sure that your sterilization process is effective. This is a small tabular column I have listed how frequently one has to use all these indicators. There is no clear consensus of how frequently they should be used. We basically follow the American standards where every cycle has to be done with these indicators. So this is a small video which shows how a biological indicator has to be used. I hope the video is playing. Please let me know if it's not playing so that I can skip on this video. So the biological indicator has to be placed inside the autoclave the way it is packed. One has to be kept outside and one processed in the autoclave. After the autoclave is done, both the indicators are taken. The inner tube is broken as shown here, and they are incubated in a biological indicator incubator for around 57 degrees Celsius for 48 hours. It is very important to break the inner tube, otherwise you will make the whole process is a waste. So after they are incubated, you will find the non-autoclave vial turning yellow, showing there's a growth of the bacteria, whereas the one that is processed does not change in color. This is the only biological indicator, the only indicator which proves that your autoclave has worked properly. So there are separate biological indicators for ETO and steam sterilization. Before you induce a new autoclave into installation, make sure that you have 2 biological indicators which has to be negative before you start using your autoclave. A class 5 autoclave is equivalent to a biological indicator. And this is a perfect look of a biological indicator. These are the manufacturer guidelines which shows what is negative and what is positive of a biological indicator. Please follow this and make sure that you read it every time before you start your surgery. The Bovedic test is another important test which has to be done before you start putting an autoclave. It should be done in an empty autoclave. The paper or the strip should be packed in an envelope technique in a linen, as shown here.
So this can give you some idea at 1 month, but this.
And ensure that you run the linen inside an empty autoclave, because this basically ensures that all the air inside the autoclave is removed and make sure that the paper changes color. You need not run the entire autoclave cycle. The dry time is not needed. Initial temperature is reached, then you can go ahead. So this is then a chart which shows the troubleshooting of the Bovedic test. So this is the class 6 indicator. So I'll finish another 5 minutes. See, the class 6 indicator is very important whenever you have a hollow instrument. The most important thing and the common mistake done here is the way you fold the indicator. The indicator has to be folded inwards as shown here and not outwards, because it's very important, because most of the time you'll find if the indicator is folded outwards, the test is positive even with the initial autoclave cycle before it gets completed. Then this should be packed as shown here. Make sure you use a medical grade sealant to close this, which is actually 3 centimeters in length, and then it is autoclaved. So this is the class 6 indicator, how this should be used. If you're using only porous or linen, use the Bovedic test. Hollow instrument and porous instrument, use the PCD test. Then surveillance is quite important. OT methodological survey, water culture is quite important, and it's be done at least minimum twice a week. Biomedical waste segregation at source is very important. Segregate everything at source, measure them, weigh them, and list them, and submit all this in your website or to the PCB. Reuse policy is very important. All the materials and instruments which you are reusing has to have a policy according to the manufacturer guidelines. And in case of a sterilization failure, make sure that you recall the instruments on which the patient has to be used, and also examine them to make sure the infection does not spread. Pre and post prophylaxis exposure is important, and all staff has to be immunized. And finally, the most important one is staff training, because without this, none of the hospital infection protocols can find its place. These are some of the quality indicators. The hospital can define the quality indicators which they like and go ahead with it. Thank you. Hello, Gagan, over to you.
That was a lovely talk, Dr. Kumaran, I should say. I
Thank
always
you, madam.
learn something from your talks.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Shakeen Singh will be the next speaker. Shakeen, Dr. Gagan, Dr. Kumaran has completed his talk.
Yeah,
so-
I heard that. It was on. So Dr. Shakeen is the next speaker. Please introduce him.
So good morning, Dr. Gagan. Please give me a minute to just come out to the. Let me share my screen. Screen share.
Dr. Shakeen,
Any problem, Dr. Shakeen?
you
I'll
want
just
me
take
to
a-
start?
You
I-
can
Just,
take
just
a-
1
no,
minute. Just
just
1 minute. Just 1 minute. Please.
While in interest of time, I had a question for Dr. Nirmal Frederick. Sir, what is your opinion about digital signatures and validation of digital signatures? So what is the status of that now with NABH and the government regulation?
Thank you, Samina. I think you know the answer already, but still for the audience sake, the digital signatures are now accepted and valid in the court of law, and the new IT Act has enabled digital platform and is focusing on digitization of many records. So digital signatures are now accepted in many of the legal documents also. So that means our EMR, the health records, the consent forms, all can be digitized. So far, we had an issue with the law enforcement agencies about the validity of having a hard copy and then digitization. But now with the new IT Act and its amendment, also all this can be streamlined, and we can adopt even the consent forms, and also videographs are all accepted as part of the standard documentation.
Thank you. So we can completely go paperless now.
Absolutely.
In our
Most of the big private sector corporates
That's Mina.
have gone, have
I think,
adopted this and then gone to be
Yes.
totally paperless. Yes,
Dr.
Shakil,
Gagan?
if you're ready, we can go ahead.
can Dr. Smina,
Yes.
Smina
I'll go
can
on.
start it.
Yes.
I'll just take a minute.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much. Thank you.
Right and clear.
Sincere thanks to Dr. Gagan Dudeja for letting me be a part of this wonderful IC. And a very good morning to everybody here at AIOC 2021. So I'm sure that you enjoyed the previous talks, and they were all about enthusing you towards taking this step towards quality and getting your hospital benchmarked with NABH. For a moment, just think that you are not one of us is looking at improving the quality at it does not mean I have
Doctor, your voice is breaking, not clearly audible. Can you please check, Doctor?
uh,
I think she's facing some technical issue.
Just give me a second. We'll just talk to her.
If Dr. Shakeen is ready, you can go ahead with this presentation.
Dr. Samina is joining again. We'll just wait for 20-30 seconds.
Yeah.
Shakeen sir, your presentation is ready.
Dr. Gagan,
Sir, your presentation is ready now.
I'm not able to come onto the screen. I'm just trying to do that. I'll revert back whenever it's possible.
extremely sorry for that. Yes. Are you able to hear me and my screen is visible, Dr. Gagan?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So what I was trying to tell you here is that 9 out of 10 people who shy away from going for the NABH accreditation are worried about the documentation. But let me tell you one thing, that whether or not NABH, documentation is very, very important for your organization. A standard operating procedure for uniform patient care is the only way in which you can gradually evolve into an institute with the culture of quality. So what is the importance of quality in present day context? It has to be feature rich and error free. Okay, you're giving an extra cup of coffee to your patient could be a feature, but definitely it should not have any errors. Evolving public expectations, increased participation in decision making, advancements in knowledge, disease management and instrumentation, and increased complexity in management of patients. All these things leaves you without any choice but to think about some form of quality improvement on a day-to-day basis, and documentation is your first baby step. So think, when you're now listening to this talk, do not think about NABH. Think about how you can now improve the practice in your day-to-day business as usual clinical life. Standard operating procedure is a fundamental unit for efficient and uniform functions. You will find a webinar which I have taken on how to write an SOP on public domain. If you have the 40 minutes time, you can sit with your staff and go through this webinar. A hotel front office training manual can have 231 SOP. We as a healthcare organization definitely should get warmed up about having standard operating procedures. And once the SOPs are in place in your hospital, you do not have to worry about any NABH related document. Dr. Kumran has very wonderfully taught us hospital infection control and has made it very clear that operation theatre is one of the most important, dynamic, and complicated area where the safety of patient requires great priority. Besides that, you need to understand these are the documentation for hospital infection control and operation theatre. A surgery list, surgery related medical records, registers, checklist for OT disinfection, checklist for day before surgery, on day of surgery, after surgery, terminal cleaning. This is a part of your hospital infection control, which is the most important manual of your organization. Is it mandatory because you're going for NABH? No, my friends. Biomedical Waste Rules 2016 mandates that any hospital who is generating biomedical waste should have a hospital infection control committee, a hospital infection control manual, and the minutes of the meeting every month should be recorded. So whether or not NABH, you should be having documentation for hospital infection control in your hospital. Sterilization protocols, the right way, the overloading. Imagine if this is all written down clearly. Imagine a world where if a new employee wants to join your organization, you're giving them a manual in their hand and saying, this is my Apex manual. This is a manual which talks about your vision, your mission, your quality values, right? Your safety guidelines, and the kind of impression your new employee gets. He or she is already getting warmed up to a culture where things are done with a proper system from the day one. In fact, in our appointment letters, we write that you will have to implement your duties according to the standard operating procedures. Any documentation which happens for hospital infection control, this is, for example, for monitoring, all the tests, patient documentation, every batch number of each cycle, sterilizer number, production date, expiry date, person responsible for production is going to be very important if you get one case of surgical site infection, isn't it? You need to validate that that particular surgical set, what was used for that patient, has been sterilized. And if you need to recall all the instruments or all the disposables used for that particular patient and see that they are not used for other patients, this documentation is going to be handy. So this is something which I want to tell you, that every small documentation in your hospital has a purpose. It's not just because NABH is telling you to do it. So imagine a situation where a documentation where there is no SOP and with SOP. Without SOP, we already know what's happening. With SOP, the patient records are vital for continuity of patient care. Medical records serve as proof of proper care if any disputes arise. Accountability can be fixed with proper documentation. Recall is possible in case of surgical site infection. There are reorder levels, and like Dr. Gagan said, LASA drugs. So you will never be in a situation of a stock out, especially when you really need that particular medicine or disposable. An OT scheduler, a very important piece of your document. It cannot be scribbled. It has to be given the due respect, made correctly with all possible details, including the expiry date of the intraocular lens. And this is something which should be stuck in your OT when you're operating, even if you have that one case on that particular day. OT list, person responsible, and the list should be sent a day ahead to be handed over in person with the name of the doctor and the name of the nurse and to be put in the OT. This becomes an important piece of document. So accountability with key performance indicators, with theater managers, with the infection control team, with surgeons and with anesthetists. A risk readiness with surgical site infection, process maps and escalation maps in case of sterilization failure. Your OT staff has put in efforts to make the SOP. From grassroots level, everybody knows that they have written this thing. This SOP has been reviewed and then approved. It is not a copy-paste job like Dr. Nirmal was trying to tell us. And obviously the feeling of ownership and accountability of the SOP and the mood to follow it is much higher. the chances that it will be implemented is higher. A sterilization failure process map is the most important document in your operation theater, where your staff recognizes a failure and is empowered to stop a sterile load if they have any doubts of this of the sterility of that load. Can you see this bright flashing car? You need to intervene before damage occurs. Otherwise, something like this can happen. So surveillance and monitoring becomes a part of your routine activities. Dr. Nirmal also again told us about internal audits. This is all about what we're talking about, internal audits, and it has to be documented, right? We believe only in God. Everybody else will have to show a document. This is a protocol on surgical site infection. You're already ready that if an infection happens, what all you will look into. And a format is in place. This is a code blue form, which is already available in your hospital, where in a case where you have to call for a code blue and give a CPR, a basic life support, there is somebody who is noting down the minutes of meeting and a code blue form filled. This proves that in your organization, this patient had a cardiac arrest, a CPR was given, all the emergency resuscitation was given, and this is the minutes of the meeting. Imagine it becomes such an important document to prove that you have done all whatever you could in that particular circumstance. A grievance, a simple thing as a grievance, from a debt to a grievance. Imagine if there is a proper SOP for grievance handling. It is handled according to the protocol, and the patient will be more than happy to overlook the incident. Inventory management. If there is a proper documentation for your inventory management, for your medications, a proper reorder level, an economic ordering quantity, your first in, first out, just in time inventory. If this is happening correctly, then you will be sure that there are no stockouts. This is a copy of what we do, and it's stuck on our refrigerator. A clear level of reorder level is written over there for each drug. So whenever that number is reached, automatically it's a no-brainer that the medicine is ordered. And you definitely do not want something like this in your operation theater. Appointments, again, with SOP, there is a proper way in which an appointment is given. This is something which is beyond accreditation. You remember that when you want to follow NABH standards, only the standards which has an asterisk on it require documentation. Where it's written, documented policies and procedures are required, or staff is trained. If staff is trained is written, that means you need training records for the staff. But what I'm talking about is a documentation at all areas of your hospital. A registration SOP. Demographic details and general consent is collected without fail. Now, it is not required. Error-free billing and fees collection can give realistic waiting period to the patient. A standard operating procedure is something like this, where everything is written correctly, but you decide how you want. Nobody is expecting a crisp SOP from you on your first accreditation cycle. Something what you have done, what your staff has done will be really valued. A process map is a part of your standard operating procedure. For example, this is a process map for registration and billing. Here, clearly there are prioritizing levels written so that the staff, the front office staff knows that if a patient has eye injuries, vulnerable patient, or an infective patient, they have to be prioritized and fast-tracked. How simple this can be. Investigations. With an investigation, there will be correct reading, accurate calculations. A consultant, when the patient goes into the doctor's room, the first 3 minutes is the time when the doctor decides. Actually, thin slice is the doctor. The patient decides how good your doctor is. If the doctor is tuned to working with a particular SOP, then obviously the treatment and plan of care will be uniform. There is a format in which the initial assessment is done. Counseling. if there is a proper counseling SOP, the patient will be able to make an informed decision. Patient will feel confident of the hospital's efficiency because all the queries are answered in a systematic manner. And patient will be compliant with the treatment plan post-operatively. Insurance. Again, with insurance, there'll be patient will have clarity about the conditions which are in the control of the hospital and the areas which the hospital are not responsible for their insurance claims. The outcome is that you will have less unhappy patients. This is our team, Zamindar, and I should say that anything what I do or say, I have a lot of support from my team always, and I am always thankful to them. We do run a knowledge sharing platform once or twice in a year, and if you do have time, you can join us for this learning and sharing and brainstorming activity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Samina, for a very comprehensive talk. And for the last talk for the day, it will be Dr. Shakeen Singh from Amritsar talking about the legal and statutory compliances. Over to you, Dr. Shakeen. Shakeen sir, you are on mute.
Just a minute. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
So good morning to all, and sorry for the glitches. Basically, my previous system was not working. I had to shift on to the other system. And thank you, Dr. Gagan, for including me in this important IC. So I will talk about the statutories. The legal responsibility of an hospital is being a public institutions deal with the life and death, hence carries specific responsibilities and liability within and outside the hospital. Failure to comply invite legal actions. I suppose I have to rush forward because of the less of the time. Liability of the hospital to the owner to follow the rules and regulation for achieving the objects, to the staff to provide a safe, healthy, congenital atmosphere to the work, safety of the building and equipment and sanitary environment, contractual obligation to suppliers, service providers, adequate safety for the patients, relatives, and visitors, breach of legal obligations by any staff, maintenance of law, order, and adequate facilities. The hospital is, carries the responsibilities towards the patients, towards the relatives, visitors, hospital staff, police, local government and society, women organization, youth organizations. The different regulations which we go across is an instruments mandate by the government to impose set of conditions which a SEO must comply with before and after it is permitted to operate. These regulations are based on the minimum standards, inspections, enforcement, and public accountability. Statutory compliances are, statutory means of or related to statutes or what we normally call law or regulations. Compliance just means to comply with all adherence to these. So statutory compliance means so you are following the law on a given issue. Statutory regulations ensure that the providers adhere to at least the basic minimum standards. High quality of service, however, calls for more than just a statutory obligations. Law can be best force the hospital to follow the standards in a letter, but not in the spirit. Ensures that the provider adhere to at least the basic minimum standards, more than just the statutory obligations. It's more than, but not more quality. The spirit is more important than the letter. Healthcare laws, three main sources: statutes, case law, code of conduct. Statutes, regulations, statutory instruments, requirements that must be adhered to. Specific for medical field only, many others not specific to medicines. Case law principles derives from the interpretation of individual court cases, for example, consent, confidentiality, and medical negligence. This applies to all areas of clinical practice and it represents a constantly evolving area of law which changes the way we deliver medical services, what we can call a common law. Code of conduct and ethic issued by the medical councils, like your registration. Law relevant for hospitals, registration and licensing, during commissioning, during functioning, and Common Act. Registration and licensing requirements towards Shop and Establishment Act, licensing for blood bank, building permit, NOC for chief fire officer, licensing for NOC under pollution control, license to operate lift under left escalate, etc. NOC for DG set if it's there. Common acts also applicable to healthcare are like Employment Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provision Act, and the Income Tax Act, related law, Sexual Abuse Law, Laws Act specifically for healthcare institutions like PCP and DT, Drug and Cosmetic Act 1945, license under narcotics and psychotropic substances, biomedical waste, transplant, HOTA, Food Safety and Standard Act 2006, Motor Vehicle Act if you have an ambulance, relevant public health legislation like Epidemic Act, like nowadays the COVID-19, HIV, AIDS bills, registration for birth, death, notifiable disease, Environment Protection Act. Statutory documentations towards clinical documentation, towards medical legal records, income tax record, pharmacy records, employee records, banking record, reportable and notifiable disease record. Building and special norms. The regulations related to building permission, norm, and space allocations are statutory obligations. Ensure adequate space, lighting, ventilation, continuous potable water and power supply under National Building Code. Building and special norms. Allotment of a land approved for use of a hospital purpose is required under the Urban Act, Land Act. Planning, building the hospital is controlled by the local municipal law. Building plan have to be approved by the local government. No objection certificate from the fire departments, a certificate from the electricity department, a certificate of fitness for the operating the lift. Starting managing a SU, a proprietorship or a private partnership, of working hours, composition of the employee, etc. under the Shop and Establishment Act. Safe, hazard-free environment. Safe and hazard-free environment, no harm is the basic mandate. The law make it obligatory safety of all stakeholders, like fire NOC, PCB, and biomedical waste. Safety ensures with the accreditations. Verify the plan of the organization has a plan and provision for early detection, abatement, containment of the fire and a non-fire emergency. This is the most commonly seen across emergencies. The organization has a documented safe exit plan in case of fire and non-fire emergencies. Staff is trained for their role in case of such an emergency, for which we need to have a mock drill kind of things. Conduct and documents and nurses and HR. IMC Professional Conduct Etiquette Ethics Regulation 2002. Code of Ethics has both moral authorities and legal bindings. Any serious violations renders the individual liable to cancellation of the registration and a penal action under the law of tort, negligence, or even IPC. Maintenance of the medical record. Every medical record has a unique identifier. Organization has a policy identifies those authorized to make entry into the medical record. Every medical record entry is dated and timed. The author of the entry can be identified. The content of the medical record are identified and documented. The record provides an up-to-date chronological account. This is the most commonly seen, NCs during inspections. Display of a registration number is a mandatory issue. IMC regulation towards advertisement is there. Certain guidelines we should not be unnecessarily advertising. You have to share certain information that should be within a rule regulations. Then the membership in a medical society, you need to be registered within a state where you're practicing. Towards the biomedical waste is a big issue nowadays. Right of the patients. Consent implies expressed and qualified. Under RTI, it's obligatory for the service provider to provide all the information required to the patients on demand about his treatment. SCO required to display the registration certificates and the service along with the schedule of changes. Quality management of full information of and education discussion about the course, and the risk benefits and the initiation and the treatment or even the alternative for that. Security of the patients. Security of the patient while in a hospital, especially vulnerable group is more important, like women, infants, children, old and unconscious patients. Prime responsibility of the hospital and the treating doctor, hospital proprietor, administrator, they are accountable and punishable under this act. Safe medication. The Drug and Cosmetic Act Pharmacy Act and NDPS Act provides for safe storage, preservation, prescription, dispensing of drug by qualified and authorized person only. HR management is another different important aspect is the statutory compliance for HR is the ESI, Provident Fund, Profession Tax, Gratuity, the Minimum Wages Act, the Maternity Benefit Act, the Payment of the Bonus Act, the Payment of the Wages Act. Hospital employee rule and regulations, patient life and safety comes first. Essential service defined under Essential Service Maintenance Act. Other regulations governing the business aspects is the Income Tax Act 1961, Sale Tax, VAT registration, certification, vehicle registration. Other statutory required commonly overlooked by the SUs are to practice medicine without proper registration with the State Medical Council or the Medical Council of India would violate express because somebody is registered maybe in Maharashtra or the central is practicing in Punjab or person registered in Punjab cannot practice in Rajasthan or somewhere else. So also this is for employee staff that is unqualified will violate the provision of the Indian Medical Act Council. Emergency treatment, no healthcare provider or healthcare establishment shall refuse a person emergency medical treatment until such person stabilizes irrespective of the person's capacity to pay. If a facility for the requirement emergency medical treatment is not available with the healthcare establishment, it shall be the duty of the SU to provide him the first aid and make him the appropriate arrangement to shift him to the nearby SU. Non-discrimination in the healthcare. We cannot discriminate the patient on the basis of the age, sex, class, place of residence, religion, caste, physical or mental ability, mental health stature, or HIV status whatsoever. Treatment in medical legal cases, when any issues of a healthcare establishment is involved in a case that is of a medical legal nature, no healthcare provider or healthcare establishment shall deny treatment merely on the ground of receiving police clearance before starting the treatment. Sorry, I'm stuck with my slide.
Your slides are moving, Shakeen.
Yeah. Okay. Then towards the confidentiality, all information concerning a users, including information relating to, am I audible? His or her health status,
Yes.
treatment or a stay in the healthcare establishment is confidential and is to be treated as such. No person may disclose any information, including any record of the users contemplating in a subsection unless the user consent to that disclosure in writing. A court order or any law requires such disclosure or a non-disclosure of the information represents a serious threat to the public health. Maintenance of the confidentiality shall be taken with respect to a person affected by HIV, AIDS, etc. A person with a mental health problem too. Second opinion. On requesting for a second opinion or on opinion on his or her health status from another healthcare provider, the user shall not be prevented from consulting. The assessment in maintenance of the record. The person in charge of a healthcare establishment shall ensure that a health record contains such relevant information as may be prescribed is created and maintained at that healthcare establishment for every user of the health services. The patient shall have a complete access to all of his health record and shall have the right to be provided with a report of the diagnosis, the medical treatment, the state of his her medical conditions, and the investigation whatsoever. Overview of the national health legislations, present status, 10 core areas, important law applicable to private practice, Indian Medical Code, biomedical management, human resources. Recent challenges, Clinical Establishment Act, Income Tax, TDS, Service Tax, Insurance, TPA issues. Way forward would be accreditation with the NBH, which is going to help us in the maintenance of all those records and the statutory obligations. Thanks for your patient hearing. Sorry for the glitches in between because of the internet problem. Thank you, Dr. Gagan.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Dr. Nirmal for the concluding remarks and to moderate any question if it's there?
So thank you, Gagan, and thank you all the speakers for highlighting the important aspects of accreditation. And it was nice to hear all the very comprehensive, very informative talks. Are there any questions, Gagan?
No, sir, I have not received any questions.
Okay. So the few concerns with many of our friends is it the right time to start accreditation if you have not started? So since COVID time, we are panicked with the infection status, many lockdowns and many waves. And what we believe is what we have seen during the COVID pandemic is most of the accredited hospitals who had set infection control protocols and systems in place were able to recoup in a better way and restart their practice, or at least control the practice during the lockdown, and also restart much earlier than the non-accredited or hospitals who are not covered. So accreditation really helps during this pandemic time also. And since we have time for all these management activities and clinical work is less, I think this is the right time for hospital to focus on implementing quality standards, understanding the hospital issues, and also doing a thorough internal audit using this lean season to start or continue your quality improvement program. So I think that would be the right approach to approach accreditation during this COVID pandemic. What's your take, Dr. Samina?
I think I completely agree with you, Dr. Nirmal. It is a great time to start this journey, especially if you're going to start writing down your SOPs and stuff like that from grassroots level. If you're going to encourage your staff to do that, this is a great time to do that.
Okay.
So
I think
I completely agree with you.
Time is up, and we are on time to complete and hand over the podium to the next group. Thank you all the listeners and delegates for joining us for this instruction course, and I hope you are benefited by the course. I'm sure most of you would join the accreditation journey and get benefited. Thank you, Gagan, and thank you all the speakers.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Speakers, thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha.
Thank you all.